Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about the new feature that Ancestry announced at RootsTech a few weeks ago. It is called MyTreeTags. Now, those of you who have been using it for a few weeks, this might be a little bit of a refresher course. You might learn some new things about how to use the feature. I'll give you a few examples of how I'm using it. For those of you who've never heard of it before, this is your introduction. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, we are first going to talk about how to get MyTreeTags. They are currently still in beta. So if you want to opt into the beta for that, I will show you how to do that. If you don't want to opt in, totally your choice. Second, I'll show you how to use them. So we'll review the universal tags, we'll look at some ideas for custom tags, and then we'll look at how to search by them. And this is where they become super powerful because it allows you to start to organize information in your tree in a way that makes sense to you and to make some new discoveries in your tree. And then I'll wrap up today with just some best practices, things that I've learned over using this for the last few weeks, things that I've learned from some of you as you have provided us with feedback about using them. So first things first here, let's talk about how to get MyTreeTags. When you are on Ancestry, if you come up here and you click on the Extras menu, and then you scroll down here to Ancestry Lab, that's going to take you to a place where you can sign up to enable a couple of different beta experiences. Now we'll talk about the new and improved DNA match list in a future episode, but this week we're talking about MyTreeTags, and you're going to want to just enable that so that you have access to it in your tree. Here we are on the family tree. I've started it here with my grandfather, and we're looking at the view from him. And this is what we call pedigree view. Some of you may be familiar with family view, but pedigree view just shows an individual, their parents, grandparents, and so on. If I click on any person in the tree, if I've already assigned some MyTreeTags to that person, you're going to see it right here in tree view. Similarly, if I was to go to the profile view for my grandfather in the tree, you would see those same tree tags that I had assigned up here in the header in the tree view. So you can access tree tags from either the tree view or the person view. Now, if you've never assigned a tag to someone before, their profile is going to look a little something like this. You're going to have this new little icon here that's a little tag with a plus sign. When you click that, it's going to pop out a side panel entitled Workspace. Now that Workspace side panel has always been here. Some of you may not have noticed it before, but it's where your notes and comments live. And just as a quick refresher on that, notes in a public family tree are still private. So whether your tree is public or private, your notes are private. So it's a way to keep track of your research. I like to put stuff in there as I'm researching. I take meticulous notes about all the things that I'm working on. I use it as a little bit of a to-do workspace. Comments, however, are public if your tree is public. Now, if your tree is private, of course, nobody can even see the person in your tree. But if your tree is public, the comments on the deceased people there are going to be public. So we've just added MyTreeTags to this existing pop-out side panel that is called the Workspace. And we have lots of tags here, so I'm just going to go through them so that you understand what the tags are and what our intention was in providing those tags. And maybe hopefully you'll start to think of some things you can do with these tags. So we're going to start here at the bottom under relationship tags. So relationship tags are just a way to clarify information about a person in your tree. And some of these were created, actually a lot of these tags were created based on what we saw some of you already doing in your trees, but you were trying to find workarounds and hacks to make it work for you. And so we've created MyTreeTags very much out of a need that many of you have expressed, that you want to be able to tag information in your tree. And so we're just providing you a native way within your tree to do that. So some of these tags are things like adopted into or adopted out of this family. As DNA testing has become more of a prevalent part of family history research, as more people have started tracing both biological family lines as well as family lines of families that they were raised with or raised by, then these two tags become kind of important, because you don't want to have one of your DNA matches looking at your tree and trying to figure out the biological or the genetic connections when there's a really prominent adoption in the family at a key point in where those relationships might lie. So being able to tag this makes this more apparent both to you and to other people looking at your tree. Now we have a couple here, things like somebody who died young or never married or had no children or was an orphan. One of the things that I do a lot of, and I know a lot of you do as well, is what we call descendancy research. So ancestry research is where you're looking for the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents and kind of a straight line back through your family tree. But those of us who've been at this a little while know it's sometimes really useful to fan out from there. As a matter of fact, it's called the Fan Club. There's another video you can find about that. But the idea is, as we add the children and the grandchildren and sometimes even the great-grandchildren of one of our ancestors, it makes it more likely that we're able to find information about that person because we've identified all of the people in their life, or a large chunk of them, their family. It also means we're more likely to be following the correct family lines. Lots of men named John O'Brien, for example. As a matter of fact, probably a lot of them with fathers named William and mothers named Mary. But only one John O'Brien who had a wife named Ada May, or a daughter named Ada May, and a wife named Frances Jones. And you start to add the relationships to that, and it makes it a little bit more robust. So I do tons of descendancy research, which means I need a way to tag in my tree when to stop researching. Just a quick way to look at it and to be able to capture that information. When I'm doing ancestry research, I always know I'm looking for two parents. But when I'm doing descendancy research, I don't always know. Did this person get married or not? Did they have children or not? And so being able to tag that once I have proven that particular fact, this person never married, this person had no children, this person died young, meaning before marriageable or childbearing years typically, then I can do that. Sometimes people have multiple spouses, and hopefully I've entered all of those spouses in my tree, but sometimes I haven't for various reasons. And so being able to, again, to tag that so that that becomes readily apparent both to me and to the people looking at my tree, that becomes important. And then this last relationship tag here in the middle is a direct ancestor. So that's, again, something that a lot of you are trying to figure out a way to mark in your tree. And so we've given you a way to do that. Now, of course, direct ancestor just means anybody with the word parent in their title of their relationship to you. So a parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great-grandparent, so on. If somebody is an aunt or an uncle or a cousin to some degree, they are not an ancestor or a direct ancestor. That phrase is actually kind of redundant. An ancestor means somebody who is you directly descend from. Now, if you ever have any questions about what Ancestry means by some of these tags, you can click on any one of these little question marks, and we've tried to provide some context in the limited space we have available there to do that. Or of course, you can always just ask questions here on the YouTube channel. I'm happy to answer that. So those are the available relationship tags. Now, next we have a series of what we call our research tags. The research tags I'm super excited about. So I don't know about you, but I don't have a ton of time to devote to my own personal family history research. What that means is that when I sit down on a Sunday night with my dad or on a Saturday afternoon when I have a couple of hours, I want to get right to work. I don't want to spend the first 20 minutes of a 2-hour research session trying to figure out what to look at or what to research or where I left off last time. So this top tag here under research tags allows you to mark actively researching. This means this is somebody in my family tree that I am actively focused on researching right now. And when we get to how to use these tags, you're going to see why that's important. But the brief explanation there is you can actually start to search and filter by these tags. So I could quickly sit down, pull up a list of people I'm actively researching, and away I go without wasting any of my precious research time. Okay. Another tag we have available here is brick wall. Now, some of you have heard me talk about John O'Brien, and you know he is very much a brick wall in our family tree. And you can use that in a number of ways. Now, in my case, I'm going to mark him both actively researching and brick wall because he is both for me. Some of you may choose to use the brick wall feature as your way to say, you know what, I've done everything I can do. I am hopelessly stuck right now. And you can mark that as a brick wall. And then occasionally you can go back to those brick walls and see if there is new records that have become available or new knowledge or skills that you have gained that are going to help you navigate that a little bit or learn how to overcome that brick wall a little bit. So you can use the brick wall tag, of course, however you choose to use it. I'm choosing to use it, meaning this is a place in our tree where we have been stuck. It's not just that I haven't done the research to figure out who his parents are yet. I've got plenty of those in my tree. This is an actual active place where I'm stuck in my tree, but I'm also going to continue researching it. Now, complete is an interesting concept, at least in my mind. The reason I suggested this tag is because sometimes I have just done all the research that I'm going to or want to do about a particular person in my tree. And so I'm going to mark them complete, not meaning I've met any standard, not meaning I have found absolutely everything there is to find out about this person, not meaning I could write a biography about them because I have so much information. No, it just means I've done what I want to do with the information about this person and I've moved on. Okay, so that's kind of the thinking around the complete tag. The next tag here is hypothesis. Now this one is super fun to me because very often I will come across information where somebody claims that the parents of a person in my tree are this particular person or this particular couple. And I haven't had time yet or inclination yet to go out and prove that that is actually true. Because just because somebody put it in a tree or said so doesn't make it true. And so if I want to actually later come back and research this, but I want to put it in my tree either as a placeholder or because I want to see what leaf hints are generated, or because I want to see how it affects my DNA connections, right? So the people on your DNA match list match you regardless. You share DNA with those people. They are related to you. But sometimes you can use some of the automated tools by putting some hypotheses in your tree and seeing how they play out. And so this allows you to very clearly label that someone in your tree is just a hypothesis in that relationship so that other people are really clear about that as well. So I've kind of implied it as we've gone on today, but I want to make sure this is super clear, which is if your tree is public, other people are going to be able to see these tree tags that you have added. And that's an important thing to note. Now, of course, if your tree is private, nobody can see the information in your tree unless you have intentionally shared your tree with that person. But some of you I know keep your trees private because you play around with hypotheses, and maybe this will be an encouragement for you to now make your tree public because you can clearly label some of these things hypothesis or unverified. And there's a little bit of a difference. A hypothesis is something that I'm just trying out or testing a theory, whereas something that is unverified might be just information I've copied from somewhere and haven't taken the time to apply the genealogical proof standard to yet. So hypothesis and unverified, they're kind of similar. I intend to use them in two different ways. You can use them how you choose, but again, it's a way to clearly label the information in your tree that you're not certain about it. And then, of course, verified, I would suggest that maybe we all, myself included, should be a little bit more cautious or circumspect about how we use a verified tag. Verified, in my mind, means I have met the genealogical proof standard. Now, if that's the first time you're hearing that particular phrase, there is an entire video series that I've done. You can find it on the Ancestry YouTube channel under the playlist Genealogical Proof Standard. There are 5 steps, so there are 6 videos. That makes sense, right? There's an introduction and then 1 video for each of the 5 steps. And it is a really logical methodology for researching family history and for determining that the information that you are discovering and applying to the identity of an individual in your tree is actually for them. So it doesn't matter what your research question is. If your research question is, who are the parents of John O'Brien? Or if your research question is, when and where did John O'Brien die? Whatever the question, you can apply the genealogical proof standard to it. And once you have done that to a degree of satisfaction, then you can mark this person as verified. So again, I'm just going to suggest that maybe we all be a little bit more thoughtful about how we apply that particular tag, because if we are more thoughtful about it, then it has a lot more meaning for all of us together in the genealogy community here at Ancestry. Okay, so those are my research tags. Next up, we have some reference tags. Now, we only have 3 to start with here. I'm super interested to see what custom tags, we'll get to those, some of you start to create, because I think it may inform in the future what additional universal reference tags Ancestry offers. But for right now, the 3 that we've offered are immigrant, military service, and royalty nobility. So again, these are 3 things that some of you were creating images or some kind of magic secret code in your suffix field of the names of the people in your tree, trying to keep track of for yourselves. But the problem was those images or those secret codes in the suffix field or whatever, however you were doing it, only had meaning for you. And we really are a community here at Ancestry. What you put in your tree affects what other people see and the hints that they receive. And when people are looking at your tree, trying to evaluate information, it's just better if we're all using the same or a similar system for keeping track of that information. So we've provided you with these 3 tags about events in a person's life or parts of their identity that you can attach. So in this case, right, John O'Brien, you can see there I have him born in Ohio, but we now have evidence starting to come to light that he may have been born in Ireland, which has been the family story all along, but then we found records that said otherwise, and lots of research has gone into this if you followed along with the saga. So I might want to mark John as an immigrant from Ireland to Ohio. Of course, someone can immigrate into any country, right? It doesn't have to just be the United States. They could have immigrated from England into Australia, or from Spain into Mexico, or wherever the case may be. You can apply that tag. Similar to that is military service. If someone has actively served in the military, in this case John did, you can mark that as military service. It doesn't matter what country they've served for, what battle they did or did not serve in, okay? You have that option. And then royalty nobility, of course, applies very narrowly to a very specific set of people who might be identified as you do your family history research. So those are the reference tags. Then I want to talk to you just briefly about the DNA tags. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about my DNA process. I think it's in next week's video. But the idea is we saw a lot of you trying to capture the information or the evidence that you were discovering through your DNA match list and correlate that with the information in your family tree. So we've given you 3 very specific tags to be able to do that. Now, this one in the middle here, that's the one where if someone shows up on your DNA match list and you have been able to figure out how you're related to that person and you've added that person to your tree, you can tag them as a DNA match, meaning this person who took the test shows up on my DNA match list as a DNA match to me. I'm going to mark them in my tree as a DNA match. Now, this common ancestor here, that is the long deceased great-great-grandfather or whoever in your tree that is the common ancestor between you and your DNA match. Then this DNA connection tag, this has to do with the path. Now that's a phrase that we use a lot here internally at Ancestry, but as I was out at Roots Tech a few weeks ago and talking to a lot of you, it's a phrase that apparently a lot of you are not familiar with. So here's what we mean by the DNA path. Anytime you have a DNA match, there is a path between that match and your common ancestor. So maybe they're related to your common ancestor through their mother, and then their maternal grandfather, and then his father, and then his mother, back to your common set of ancestors. So when we say that the path or the DNA path, what we mean is who are the relatives or the ancestors along the tree that go from your DNA match, the person who took the test, back to that common ancestor. So it's just the DNA connection tag is a way to follow the path in the tree. So for example, when I'm looking at John O'Brien, I can look down at his list of children and I can see, 3 of the 5 of them are labeled as a DNA connection. What that means is that 3 of his children have descendants who have taken a DNA test and are a genetic match to me. So it enables me to start to build up evidence, right? Because if John has 5 children and I have genetic evidence that says 3 of them are genetically, descendants of 3 of them are genetically related to me, well, that's pretty good evidence that John is in fact my great-grandfather. But if John has 5 children and I only have a DNA match to descendants of 1 of them, maybe that's an indication that that evidence isn't as strong. And I either need to reevaluate the evidence to determine are all of these children really the children of John, including myself, or do I need to look for other 3rd, 4th cousins out there who I can invite to take a DNA test to build up the strength of that genetic evidence. So that's how I use those 3 tags. DNA match is the person who took the test. Common DNA ancestor is the person who is the common ancestor between you and your match. And then DNA connection helps you to follow that path back to that person. Okay, so the final set of tags here, and I'm actually going to tag these. I haven't tagged John before, so I'm doing this as we go here. So John is a common DNA ancestor for me, meaning I have DNA matches who also descend from John through other children of John. Okay, so the last set of tags here is custom tags. Now, you'll see some of the custom tags that I've started to create here. You can create custom tags, so you can give it a little short, recognizable title. We do limit you to 20 characters for the tag name. And then you can give a little bit more lengthy, like tweet length, tag description so that you or anybody that you share your tree with can remember what you used those tags for or what your purpose was behind those particular tags. So in this case, I marked that John served in the military, but I might want to get a little bit more specific. For example, John served in the Civil War, and in the Civil War, he served for the North. So I might maybe even put here, just so that I'm not being super US-centric, I may come in here and put US, okay, let's try that again. U.S. Civil War, and he served for the North. Okay, so I could add an additional description. United States, you're going to see how badly I type here. United States Civil War, served for the North. Okay, and so I can start to keep track both of maybe which conflicts they served in, but also which side of that conflict. So some of you may have revolutionary, let me rephrase that. Some of you may have U.S. Revolutionary War ancestors, where some of them were patriots and some of them were loyalists. So they may have served for the newly born United States, or they may have served for England in that particular conflict. So you can, there's lots of ways you can do this. Some of you may just want to put Civil War regardless of which side they served on, or however you choose to do that. So I've created this new tag now, and you can see it is checked for John. Now, once you have added the tags for this person, you're going to want to click this Save button. Now, some of you have commented on that or given us some feedback about that. The Notes feature here in the Workspace is actually auto-save, meaning you don't have to click a button to save it. And so we are looking at possibly making the MyTreeTags auto-save as well. But for now, you do have to click the Save button. You'll see now those are all the tags I have selected for John. I can go back in and edit them if I need to. Click the little X to delete any of them that I need to. When I close the Workspace, you're going to see those tree tags show up right here under John's name. Now, because of some limited space issues, both in the web version and as we start to look at some of the mobile app things, we need to make sure that we accommodate all those different various screen sizes that y'all are using. So we do only show 3 tags in the header. They are currently alphabetical. And then it will just tell you if there are additional tags, and you can click on that and it will pop out that side panel. Now, as I'm looking at this, I realize I forgot to mark that John is also my direct ancestor. So I can go back and I can add that. And I think that that's probably good. So I'm going to click Save. And now you see that that little number 2 changed to a number 3 because we've got 3 additional tags. Okay, so let's talk about what all this tagging is going to do for you besides giving you just these tools to start to organize and identify ancestors by information that you've asked to be able to identify them by. We also want you to be able to use this as a research tool. And the best way to allow you to do that is to give you some additional searching functionality within your tree. So some of you may remember that this little icon up here used to just be this little person with a magnifying glass. We've now written out the words tree search here because we wanted to make sure people understood what that button was, and then also to highlight some of these new beta features. So you still have all the same functionality that you always have. You could still come in here and just type in the name of a person, and we'll start to show you the people in your tree with that name. That's something you always could do. You could go to your list of all people in your tree. That's kind of a tree index. You can go to the last viewed person in your tree. But now tree search also includes these filters. So I can come in here, for example, and I can say, show me everyone in my tree who is a direct ancestor. And I can click on that, and it will show me everybody that I have tagged as a direct ancestor. Well, maybe what I really want is everyone who is a direct ancestor who also served in the military. And so I can click that, and it will then filter my list even further to here are the individuals in your tree who meet all of that criteria. And then, of course, I can back out of any one of those by clicking on the X and adjusting my filters as necessary. So lots of really great opportunities to make some discoveries in your tree. Of course, it is all dependent on you tagging the information in your tree. Now, I've got, as many of you know, almost 75,000 people in my tree. I've been doing family history continually for a lot of years, and I inherited a lot of information from parents and aunts and uncles and people before that, and have just continued to build on that. So lots of people in my tree to tag, but I'm just going to do it as I go. And what that means is that that filtering feature becomes more and more valuable the more information in my tree that I tag. Okay, so hopefully that was a really good overview of how to access the tree tags, how to start tagging things in your tree, what some of those tags mean, and how to start to use those tags to search and filter, right? We talked about that actively researching tag. I just go in, I select tree search, actively researching those people, and it will pull up the list and I can get right to work. Or I can say, show me all of the people who have been tagged as a common DNA ancestor, and it will show me everybody for whom I have some degree of genetic evidence that they really are my ancestors. We'll talk more about that next week. Okay. So I just want to wrap up by sharing with you some ideas for some custom tags and then just a couple of best practices tips. Ideas for custom tags. So we went back and forth about what tags to include as global tags in the program that everybody uses versus what tags we wanted to allow you to create for yourselves. And it's been super fascinating over the last few weeks since we announced this, the MyTreeTags went into beta, and to see how some of you are using these tags and some of the custom tags that you're creating. So some of these are your ideas, some of these are things that I'm looking forward to starting to tag in my own tree, but let's just run through a few of them so that you kind of get an idea for what it is that we're looking at. So like I showed you there, you might want to create a custom tag for a particular military conflict: Civil War, Revolutionary War, War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Persian Gulf War. I'm sure there are other wars around the world, lists of them that I haven't thought of or that I don't have ancestors that participated in. So whatever the military conflict is. And then like I mentioned, you might also want to create which side of the conflict. So you can create that as one tag like I did, U.S. Civil War North. I will create another one that is U.S. Civil War South. Or you can create two tags, Civil War. Well, actually it would be three tags, right? Civil War, that's one tag, and then Civil War North, Civil War South. So that way you can filter however you choose to do that. Another thing that you might want to do is create a custom tag for which branch of the service. So I have lots of family members that have served in the military, but some have served in the Army and some have served in the Air Force. And so I might want to be able to denote which branch of military service they participated in. Another thing that I have seen some of you start to tag has to do with what we call lineage societies and the eligible line for those lineage societies. So for example, if you have an ancestor who came over on the Mayflower in 1620, you might want to tag that person in your tree with a Mayflower tag, particularly for those of us with really deep colonial Massachusetts area or New England area ancestry. We may have 2 or 3 lines that go to the Mayflower, so even more, or a husband and wife and their child that all came over on the Mayflower together that we descend from. So you can start to tag those people in your tree. SAR and DAR here in the United States, that's Sons of the American Revolution, Daughters of the American Revolution. One of my personal favorites is the Society of Early American Witches. I have an ancestor who was the first woman hung in the new, or accused in the New World of witchcraft. So long before the Salem witch trials that many of you may be familiar with, she was accused of being a witch and hung in Hartford, Connecticut. And so through her, because I'm a descendant of hers, I'm eligible for that particular society. It's kind of a silly thing. But lots of other societies out there, both here in the United States and around the world, that you might be eligible for because of a particular ancestor and something that they did. So you might want to start to create tags for those. Another tag that I have been listing out so that I can start to note in my tree is religious affiliation. So I have my 4 grandparents, all 4 different religions. And so to be able to note that, and then to note the religious affiliations of their children and grandchildren, but then also their ancestors, to see how different changes or choices in religious affiliation affected the other choices that they made in their lives or the circumstances that they found themselves in. I think that that is something that could be really powerful, and it may tell a story. There may be discoveries I make in the process of creating those particular custom tags. Another tag you might want to consider is that of racial identification. Now, that's a little bit of a sensitive subject for a lot of people, and how people identify is a really personal thing. With DNA testing, it's super interesting to me to start to see some of the array of ethnicity or DNA origins where people come from. But very clearly on some historical records, we have information about whether a person was designated as Black or Indian or mulatto or whatever the case may be. As a matter of fact, I did an entire video, if you want to go check it out, on racial designations over time in historical records, specifically in the U.S. federal census, but that's certainly the concept applies universally anytime race is something that is recorded in a historical record. And that becomes important not just in understanding racial designations over time and how that's affected our family history and our family story, but it also becomes important because if you're doing research in a particular time and place where you have a white person and a black person, for example, who have the same name, having that racial identification tagged in your tree helps you to start to tell them apart. And it also, again, helps other people in the family history community start to understand that there is a difference, that these are actually two unique individuals and their racial identification is part of their identity and part of who they were historically as a person. Now, these things aren't all equal, but they are something to start to think about. Other tags that I'm seeing people start to create have to do with conditions or experiences that a person endured in their life, and how you want to capture that in your tree. So if someone either survived or was a victim of the Holocaust during and before World War II, that might be something you want to tag those people in your tree. If somebody was a victim of the Irish famine or they escaped Ireland during the Irish famine, you might want to mark that. If someone walked the Trail of Tears or was a pioneer of any kind in the U.S. or particularly here in the Western United States, that has a very specific meaning, but people can be pioneers in all sorts of ways. So there's it's not an exhaustive list. It's just an idea to start to get your mind turning about what's possible. You might want to start tagging occupations. For example, if you've got farmer, 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 blacksmith, that might be something of note that you want to start to track in patterns of in your family tree. Similar to that is literacy or education. There's a lot of historical records that we use, particularly the census, that lists whether someone could read and write. And so if you have people who can't read and write, can't read and write, can't read and write, and now all of a sudden a generation who can, that might be worth tagging in your tree so that you can see the progression of literacy within a family or of education. Somebody who has some education versus someone who graduated from high school versus someone who graduated from college. And again, you can see progressions in a family of some of those particular things. Another thing that might be super interesting to keep track of is languages that a person spoke. Again, that might be tied a little bit to the immigrant tag that already exists, but to see, was this person spoke German, this person spoke German, and then they also learned English, and now these people only speak English. So not only, I hope you're kind of catching the vision of this, not only are MyTreeTags super useful to just keep track of information about an individual and to be able to find information in your tree about an individual, they're also going to, I think, be super helpful to start to look for patterns within a family tree and make them a little bit more noticeable, because that's, to me, there's a lot of really rich story and discovery to be made in some of those patterns. So those are my ideas. If you have ideas, I would love to hear them. So here on the Ancestry YouTube channel, just put your comments in. Let us know what other custom tags you're creating, what other ideas you have for possible ways that some of those tags could be used. Okay, let's wrap up with just some tips for best practices. The first thing you need to be aware of as far as this goes is that MyTreeTags are specific to a tree, not to an account. So if you have 10 trees on your one account, some of you do. I'm a big fan of one tree to rule them all. Y'all know that, right? I have all of my ancestry in one tree because I want to be able to see it all in one place. I want to be able to utilize all of these automated tools in that fashion. But some of you have multiple trees. The MyTreeTags are specific to a tree, which means if you create a whole bunch of custom tags in one tree, you're going to need to recreate them in the other trees on your account if you want to use them in that fashion. Next tip. Be consistent, right? Just keep track, check those lists, make sure that you're not creating multiple tags of the same thing within a tree. If you mark somebody who served in the military, make sure that they really did, so be consistent and accurate. Maybe should be a little follow-up to that. The other thing that I'm just going to clue you in on is that because this is in beta, there may be some minor tweaks and changes that are made in the coming weeks and months as we get feedback feedback from some of you. And what that means is that some of the custom tags that you're creating may end up being universal tags. And so check that universal tags list occasionally and just see if anything has been added there so that you can use that universal tag instead of having to create those custom tags. And then for those of you who have created hacks, either as characters in your suffix field or images that you've uploaded, maybe it's time to go back through some of those image tags you've created, look at the people that you've added them to, and see if you can remove some of those, because there are now tags, or you can create custom tags to denote some of that information directly in your tree. That's going to clean up your tree. It's going to clean up your image gallery. And again, because we're part of this larger Ancestry community, the minute we put our tree online, it's going to help the community as well to not have all of those superfluous little images and things that mean something to you but don't mean something necessarily to the person who's getting 40 of them in their hints because you attached it to your tree. And then the last thing is there are some ways to provide feedback to us. So the best way to provide feedback to us is to use the tags. We're keeping really close track of which tags are being used most often, how many of you are tagging, what custom tags you're creating, all of that information. So we're keeping track of that, and we're using that to help guide some product decisions. And then also, when you click save on your list of tags on a person, sometimes you'll get a little pop-up box that asks for feedback. So if you get that little pop-up box, which will happen occasionally, be sure to provide us with feedback. It's a little survey you take, and then it allows you to free type some text. So hopefully you'll find that useful and helpful. We do read all of that feedback, and we'll do what we can to look at the best thing for everybody going forward. I, for one, am super excited. I love MyTreeTags. I've been playing with it for several weeks now. I see the potential and the possibilities of it. Now I just need to carve out some time to sit down and go through my tree and start to apply some of those in greater numbers so that the functionality of that becomes even more useful to me. Again, can't wait to hear how you're using them. Feel free to leave comments here on the YouTube video. I will check in on those and respond every once in a while. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun tagging your tree.